All right, hello everyone. Welcome. This is really meant to be an informal talk today. So I'm Professor McKee. I'm an assistant professor of teaching over in the bioengineering department. And what I wanted to talk to you all about today is design, kind of general principles about design, but also how you need to consider the human component as well. So I've tried to make this talk and design this talk to generate or speak to a broad audience. So some of this, hopefully you already know, and hopefully some of it's new as well, or just forces you to think about the theories and concepts you already know in a new way. So the title of the talk kind of is design, or what is design? And so looking at this, let me get back to the PowerPoint here. If in prep for this talk, I did a quick Google search of what is design or what are design principles, and you get a lot of crap. This is literally the top 4 searches: 7 principles of design, 12 principles, 10 essential principles, 5 principles, numbers all over the place. And some of this is because different businesses or different types of devices or products you're designing have different standards and different weighted considerations to them. But what I'm going to talk about today are things that I think need to be incorporated in any design process. And so I would say that we want to steer away from this idea of the word design. As Webster defines it, it's a generic term that basically means anything made by a conscious human effort, right? That's a very broad topic, and that has some utility. But I think what we want to talk about more is the basics of a design process. What does it actually look like to go in and design something? Because it's usually how you execute the design process where you run into problems, not the actual design itself. In my field, in engineering, we usually go with the ABET definition. So ABET is the Accreditation Board of Engineering and Teaching or Technology. And so their definition of an engineering process is the process of devising a system, a component, or process to meet a desired means. So it's the whole idea of going from an idea or a concept in your head to actually building a physical product that someone's going to use. It's a creative process, as you can probably all imagine. It's problem solving at its truest form. And the one that people usually mess up is it's also iterative. The goal isn't to go from the thought in your head to the perfect product in a short time span. You're going to go through multiple iterations, and you're going to learn as you go. You're going to learn from so many failures along the way. So the technical details are very important, but they're a very small aspect of the design process. And then the other thing I think sometimes people have a struggle with is getting used to the fact that there's not a single correct solution. And in fact, you are designing the solution. So there's not even a solution that's out there. So this brings me to my first common pitfall. I might be dating myself if you haven't heard of this movie, Field of Dreams. Kevin Costner stars in it. He's basically a Midwesterner. He starts having these dreams and visions of building this baseball field. And he eventually builds it. All these ghosts of amazing baseball players from decades past come and show up, and the ghosts start playing baseball. The line that's often repeated from the movie is, if you build it, they will come. Because the whole drive of the movie is, if he builds this field, these great baseball legends will show up. This is not what happens with a design process. And in fact, especially in the biotech space, this is why so many devices and designs fail. It's a great product, but you can't just build it and expect that people are going to flock to your device, right? Budgets are tight. Competitive markets are competitive. And people don't know something exists just because you have it in your garage or in your lab. So you don't want to follow this metric. In fact, what you want to do is start with the problem. So I would say to those of you who already have the idea for a device, great. Don't forget about that. But take a step back and focus on the problem. Either you'll receive a problem for a class or a project, or go in and find and define what that problem is and spend a significant amount of time on this. You are going to design a solution to the problem. And so you need to understand the problem. So go and gather information. Do interviews with customers and users. Read research articles, especially for those of you with technological ideas. You need to understand, even if you're not a research scientist or an engineer, how do the sensors work? What are the different components that are going to be interfacing? And you don't have to be an expert, but knowing some of that technical jargon, being honest about what you know and don't know, that's going to help you steer your vision of the solution. Look at existing technology companies and products. A lot of times I'll hear people say, I'm really interested in doing a startup. I love this idea of being an entrepreneur and wearing many hats, but I don't have any ideas. Fine, you don't have to. The brilliant thing is that if you go out and start studying existing technology, you're going to find dozens to hundreds of limitations or problems with that technology waiting to be addressed. Common pitfall number 2, not understanding the people. I think business students tend to have a better idea of this than how we train our students in engineering, but that's really understanding the difference between a customer and a user. So the customer, again, that's that person who's actually going to be spending the cash, right? They are spending the money on the goods and services. And then the user, which is the person who's going to directly interact with the product. You sell your product or your service to the customer, but oftentimes you are pitching it to the user to get that user backing. This is especially true in hospital spaces. So I have 3 examples here. And the first is an orthopedic drill. If I was in charge of developing and then trying to sell this orthopedic drill, I'm going to need to go and define my user. Who's the user of the orthopedic drill? It's not the patient laying on the table, right? It's going to be the surgeon or the medical staff performing orthopedic surgeries and procedures. However, if I try to sell this drill to an orthopedic surgeon, unless they are a small private practice, they are not the person who's responsible for procuring and ordering different devices and medical supplies. And most hospital networks, there is a specific department who you go to talk to about that. And guess what? That department who's going in charge, that you're going to try and sell the drill, they don't have the same needs and wants and desires as the surgical user. So a common strategy in the medical space is to find the user, the surgeon, the nurse, the medical professional, go and talk to them about your product, get information from them about what doesn't work with their current products to inform your own design, get their backing, get their support, and get them to kind of help you sell the device to the ordering staff. This is true even with t-shirts. Something as simple as a t-shirt, right? We all know there are thousands of different designs on t-shirts, and companies do a lot of work figuring out what the design should be. Who is going to be the customer person buying it? Who's going to be the user? Now for t-shirts, this brings up an interesting case. Oftentimes, once an individual reaches a certain age, the customer is the user. I go in, I buy the shirt, I wear the shirt. I am the customer and the user. That might not be true depending on the age group. A good example I like to use, that's a case where you're muddying these waters, is with diapers, right? I have a son who's 1.5 years old. He wears diapers. He is definitely a user. He's not the customer. He's not buying the diapers. That would be nice if he would contribute to the household. But I am also a user of the diaper because I'm the one who's changing the diaper. I'm the one who has to wipe them down. And you bet if I pick up a diaper brand and the diaper's not sealing well, or he's constantly peeing through them easily, I'm not going to keep buying that diaper. So I'm a user with customer power. And so that's one thing to keep in mind too when you're defining these, is there can be overlaps between who your customer and user is. You can also have primary and secondary users, and you need to take some time and thought thinking about how are you going to pitch your product or service to each one of those users? How are you going to make the sell to the customer? And how are you going to get your users to help advocate for you to the customer? All right, so back to figuring out this problem. Some ways you can go about approaching this is who's affected and who cares. Oftentimes in teaching the senior design class here in bioengineering at UCR, I'll see students pitch ideas and, they're going to affect 1 million people or 3 million people in the United States. It's a large market. This is great. Awesome, fine. We have devices that are pitched that are going to affect a couple hundred people. The scale doesn't always matter because there are ways to market devices, especially nowadays for rare diseases and procedures. You can also start with that, and you may find out that you end up branching out to a larger market. So not only who affected, but who cares. There are some very small rare diseases But the people who care about those diseases have a lot of money and are primed to be angel investors. How many people are affected? Not just directly, but widespread. I think we all can relate to this, right? We've all probably had a cousin, a family member, a friend suffering from cancer. We're not going to go through cancer treatment or anything like that, but especially with someone very close to you, you're intimately affected by that. So you're not a user, you're not a customer, but you're still affected. And then how long has the problem existed? How long the problem existed will help you start to recognize what technologies are present. Have people really solved the problem, or have they created new problems in an attempt to solve that first problem? The next thing you want to do, so this is after you've kind of started talking to customers and users and doing interviews, after you've done a lot of that legwork, you want to start thinking about the different constraints. So identify what should your solution do. Don't be afraid to change this over time as you get information from customers and users, as you read up on the technical specifications of your device components. Don't be afraid to change the solution. Think about your constraints. Budget and time are two of the biggest one. Not only your time, but how quick do you need to get this to market? Are there other competitors that you're racing against? Budgets can change over time, but it's always good to think you have less money than you actually do. What resources do you have available? Do you have friends, family, a university with makerspace settings? So maybe you don't need to go and buy the $8,000 3D printer. You can use the resource that's available at a university. And I think that's one of the biggest benefits to undergraduate students here, master's students here. There are a lot of equipment resources here available for students to use. It takes a little bit to find them, but it will save you money. Always think about, it's never too early to think about, how are you going to mass produce this device? There's a big difference between fabricating a prototype where you're doing a lot of soldering or gluing or printing something that takes, 2 days to print in your garage, versus trying to scale up to get a product that you need to make thousands of them in a week's time. Think about that manufacturing. Think about the political and social impacts of your product. You probably don't want to spend a lot of time developing a device only to find out that society is going to flat out reject it. Or you just may need to do a pivot on the cell. And then the regulatory aspects as well, which change very drastically. Any of those thinking about getting into a clinical space, there is becoming a shift where many companies are starting to focus more on ISOs, or the International Standards of Operations, which is the EU standard, over the FDA, because now the ISOs for Europe are a little bit more stringent and people like to go for a global market. All right. A lot of times, this is a lot, right? This is a lot to go through and decide what to do. I always recommend using a decision matrix. And some of this is a little bit based off of gut feeling, but a lot of it is also based off of those constraints that you listed, as well as the input that you've gotten back from customers and users. And you should certainly revise this decision matrix as you go forward. So this is a general one. In this example, when generating this table, the users were looking at designing a new pen. So you can see here, they wrote out all their different criteria: the cost to make it, similarity to current pens, maintenance, durability, so on and so forth. And then they weighed each of these. Now, there are different ways you can do weighting metrics. Some people will just do a ×1, ×2, ×3. I prefer weighting each of these criteria against each other, so that your weighting should add up to 100%. Because you could say everything is really important, everything gets ×3, but weighting your criteria against each other helps you realize, where do we really need to devote the most of our focus? The goal is to get the 80% of your device done relatively quickly. That's going to get you to a prototype the fastest. And so then they looked at kind of different designs and how they thought they fit these criteria. This, again, kind of just gives you an instance of, well, what design, what shape, what device do we want to pursue first? Which one meets our criteria the best? You want to keep track of all these, because it may be, we can see here, if we look like, okay, the Y-shaped pen and the mouse pen, those two seem to fit the criteria the best. But as they proceed forward and start to actually build those, it may turn out that users actually really don't like that. And so still having those other designs backlog that you can move back to if necessary helps. but the decision matrix here helps you weed out the important components, what you need to conserve as you're pivoting or changing your design, and what can change a little bit more freely. Common pitfall number 3. This brings me to this: perfectionism. This will kill your company. This will kill your device, especially when you're on the first couple iterations. So I'm showing here 4 products that I think we all know really well. And these are kind of what the original product looked like. So on the top left, that's Cooper Martin, or Martin Cooper. I always get his name backwards. And he was the inventor of the first cell phone. That is the first cell phone. Show me a cell phone today that people use that looks like that. All right. One, sometimes your device is going to change over time simply because technology changes. And so you're going to, of course, update your device, right? The phone's slimmer. We got a much big touch screen. No one was viewing videos on Cooper Martin's cell phone. All right. But it fit a need. It fit a problem, which was before that, it was all corded phones. You were pretty much glued to the wall while you were talking to someone. Down below, 7-Up. The original 7-Up was actually marketed as a treatment for depression. It had lithium in it. We use lithium in antidepressant drugs. I would also say that regulations have changed, because in this image, they're giving it to a child. I think nowadays we don't even recommend giving 7-Up to a child. 7-Up no longer contains lithium. In fact, the name 7-Up is thought to come from the fact that lithium is atomic number 7, and it would make you feel a lot more energetic and happy. So 7-Up. Yeah, right. So things, again, will change over time, sometimes because of regulations, or there's just new scientific research that comes out. 7-Up, rather than getting rid of their product, pivoted it to a soft drink. It's now on the market. It sells really well. I'm going to go to the one on the right first, Cheerios. This is a more simple example. The labeling changed. The ingredients have changed as well, based off of where they could source their grain and get it from. But a lot of the labeling on cereal boxes changes because over time, government agencies dictated to companies what information they need to provide clearly on the front of the box. So you also have to realize that some of the design changes you need to make might be out of your control, especially if you're in the biomedical space. The one in the center here, Listerine. Listerine actually started when it was first being formulated and proposed as, get this, an antiseptic and a treatment for gonorrhea. No medical professional is going to use it as an antiseptic or a treatment for gonorrhea. A lot of the research that they started doing panned out that it wasn't a good treatment. The company also did, I think, a smart thing, and rather than focusing on the science and engineering aspects of Listerine, went back to look at the market and got user feedback. And it turns out Listerine, when they were marketing it as an antiseptic, made, I think, about $118,000 a year. That's not a big market. There were a lot of antiseptic solutions that were already in place that hospitals were used to and didn't want to shy away from, because, you know, if you're a hospital and use a new antiseptic that doesn't work, you're in trouble. So they pivoted it to become a mouthwash. And over a 3-year period, they went from making close to $200,000 to $8 million, right? That's a big change. Do what the market tells you. Listen to the customers, and listen to the customers that have spending power. So don't let perfect become the enemy of the good. This is actually one of my favorite quotes by Voltaire. Keep in mind that you want to have a good plan in place, but work on executing the plan. It's much better to execute plan A, have plan A fail, start working on plan B, have plan B fail, and then move along with plan C. Likely elements of that plan are going to be conserved. You're going to learn important information along the way, whether that's about grants and funding that maybe you missed out on, whether that's just about the technology or the market space, because all these things are also changing over time. So don't aim for a perfect device, especially on the first run. Aim for a plan, and don't be afraid to change, cancel, or pivot that plan as you move forward. So your goal is progress, not perfection, right? We see this when Apple, and this is the classic example, right? When Apple releases the iPhone to the public, they are already working on new features, and actually you are testing their next device for them already. So what you want to do is work on proposals as well. These are useful to help organize your mind around pitches. They're usually a little bit longer and more detailed. They can become the basis for grants, and they just help you organize all your thoughts in one location. Come up with annotated sketches. These don't have to be perfect. Some of the best annotated sketches for devices were done on the back of napkins in cafes and restaurants, and then those were mocked up further. Bathroom tile with wet erase markers, right? Take a picture of it. You want to think about the critical decisions, right? Go back to your decision matrices and start refining them. What about all the different material types, right? You might have a table specific to all the different materials. What is their hardness, their durability, their, how well do they tolerate heat? Some of those things aren't going to matter for your device. Others will. If you can, or if you have the skills, or if you don't, partner with someone who does to work on computer models. When you go to a pitch competition, or if you're standing at a conference, there's nothing people love more than, one, the physical prototype, but in lieu of that, a nice CAD design model with the material properties fitted, it's shiny, it looks like the real product would, you can rotate it and move it. Those also become important and helpful for doing what we call console modeling. You can test, what happens if I drop this or drop a brick on it, and you don't have to break your device when you do that. And then produce what we call working drawings. There's a difference between having a nice dimensional 3D CAD model that looks like the real thing, but then having different sketches that show different layers and components and cutaways. So have, right, a picture speaks 1,000 words. Have several pictures. Again, don't focus on perfection in the first run. The example I'm going to use here is a gumball machine. And here's my pre-prototype. These are all images from Google of a gumball machine. It's simple. It contains the key elements. We have something to hold the candy. We have a little knob thing. We have somewhere where the candy is going to come out. And in fact, this one isn't even functional, right? But it gives me an idea of what's the size. How do these different components fit together? And how am I going to scale them up from there? It's cheap. It's cardboard. I use some hot glue here, right? Tape, Sharpie, simple materials. Start thinking about how you're going to join the different surfaces together. One of the big mistakes where people make a lot of money is they say, here's the box I'm going to make, and they don't put the screw holes in the right place. And then when they try to thread screws into it, they're cracking their material. They have to go back and redo a bunch of work. Having a simple, cheap material to make a first mock-up quickly can be very helpful, because it also helps when you go in and talk to individuals to show them it. They can hold it. Already, whenever you can give someone an object they can hold while you're talking about the device, they're going to feel inclined to share more information because they feel like they're a part of it, because tangibly it's there. You can then scale up to what we call your prototype, or your minimum viable product. This has the minimal functions. It's a little bit fancier. It's a little bit more operational. You're focusing on those major important functions, but it's probably not the finished design yet. Right here, I'm showing gumball machines made from mason jars and from wood, right? You get the proof of the design, but they're still lower quality. You're not blowing through a lot of money. Once you have that minimum viable product, right, you demonstrated functionality, you can gain some preliminary data there. And in fact, some of that may inform how you need to go back and redesign or reconfigure your device. Then you can really go and produce the product, the true prototype. And here I'm showing the M&M dispenser. Notice we've changed a couple things. We're using metal now, a more expensive part. This is functional. We even have a quarter slot in here so we can make money off of it. We've also pivoted maybe from user input. We're no longer using gumballs. We got M&Ms or Skittles in here, right? So things are going to change even as you're going from that very preliminary pre-prototype all the way up to the final product. And this is why you want to execute early and execute quickly, not without thought, but with a willingness to change. The military does this, not quite to this level, right? But if we're in charge of designing a tank for the military, we're not going to go in and spend the billions or millions of dollars to make the tank. We're going to start with a simple prototype. And here we have a cat in a cardboard box. We're thinking about the user. We scaled up, right? A CAD model. And there's a lot of modeling that's done for military equipment, a lot, because it's expensive to build, right? Before it's built into the next iteration. And then this is going to go all the field testing and all these different things to get that true data. So don't be afraid to refine the design as you go. Make changes. You're going to modify and rebuild the prototype as you move forward based off of input, based off of what you yourself figure out. Document it all. The last thing you want is to document something poorly. Maybe you have to set this idea aside for a little bit while you're going through finals week. And then you come back and you spend a whole day just trying to remember what you had done, or worse yet, you forget a critical detail. In the class senior design I teach, I tell students to keep everything in their design notebooks. I am always, it's getting to the point where I'm not surprised, but I'm always amazed for the last 5 years, how often students encounter a problem with their design in spring quarter. And they go back and they look at their notes from 15 weeks, 20 weeks prior, and there's the solution. They need to figure out more details on it, but the solution was already pitched and they didn't even realize it at the time. Always find a critique. You don't want to be talking to people who are just like, yes, this is a great idea, you should do it. Certainly have the motivators, have the energizers, but you also want people who are going to give you honest feedback of your product is crap. And here's why I think it's crap. All right. You need to decide who you listen to and how much you weight what they're saying. But if you're talking to a group of 10 people and no one has anything negative to say, go find 10 more people. Wait till you at least have one critique, because there's no way any device or product or service is always going to make everyone happy. And you'll learn more about upsetting people than you will from making everyone happy. So short list, things to think about while designing, the specifications of your design. I like to put this into a little honeycomb matrix. So your design specifications, think about the function. What does your device or service do? What is its intended use? What does it look like? Color, shape, size, texture, product and packaging. Maybe there's variability here depending upon who your user or users are. You're going to make a pink teddy bear. You're going to make a green teddy bear. The environment. What's the ecological impact of the use of your product, of the design of your product, of the manufacturing and shipping of your product? Especially nowadays, people are very ecologically in tune. What about government? At the state and the federal level, are there taxes? How are those going to affect the cost? And are there regulations? Oftentimes I hear so many people say, well, our device is better because it's cheaper to manufacture, but they actually haven't gone in and thought about all the costs. What it's going to cost to manufacture it, to move those raw materials around, to get their product to the stores, for the stores to make money, for them to make money, for the marketing to make money, to keep their legal teams. But then the big one that's often missed is taxes. What about societal? What are trends and cultural preferences? Are you designing a product that in a year or two, it's going to be a fad and it's gone? You can make a lot of money off of fads, but they're likely not going to be a wealth generator for your entire life. Materials. What do they cost? What effect do they have on the product? Availability and durability. I like to use the phrase here, you get what you pay for. If you're going with very cheap components, especially sensors, be prepared for it to just fail, and you might spend a lot of time troubleshooting it and not knowing that your sensor is no longer working. For pre-prototypes, for early stage things, that's okay. But there are regulations, again, these tie together, that can affect what level of material you have to use. Performance. Where's the product going to be used? How's it going to be used and who's using it? What is really important here? Efficiency, speed, accuracy, lifespan of the device. You find variations of these even in single settings. Going back to the hospital, you have devices, ECMO machines, pacemakers. They need to function for years, and they need to have a very fast turnaround time, right? If that pacemaker stops working or doesn't work accurately, you're going to kill someone, right? But other things don't matter as much. The little cup that you pee into, they're not really worried about the lifespan of that. They probably want it to sit on a shelf for a couple of years, but once they run the test, they're pitching that. It's not going to get reused, hopefully. Who's your target user and customer? Always revisit this. Again, don't be afraid to change this, but keep in mind, who are you designing this product for? Who is purchasing the product? And what do those individuals want? What do they desire? What are their needs? Because at the end of the day, the goal is to meet their need, whether that's more efficiently than an existing product or in a new way that is currently not being met. So think about affordability, ease of use, safety, versatility, and warranty. These are kind of 8 common failures in most engineering design. I'll just leave these up here. I'm not going to read through all of them, but if you look, it's usually because you're either over or under thinking something. So don't over assume things. At certain times, you will need to make assumptions. You will need to make reasonable assumptions. The data just isn't there, or it's behind a paywall that you don't have the money for, or it's going to take you years and years and years to get, right? So make reasonable assumptions and move forward, but remember that you made assumptions and continue pursuing that data. Understand the problem. Again, it starts with the problem. It does not start with the device. It does not start with the solution. It starts with the problem. The example I usually utilize here is a chili competition. I'm just going to run through some of the basics real quick, but if you find that you have trouble thinking about this or need help brainstorming, this is a great way to do it because everyone is capable of understanding chili, but there's also a lot that goes into it. So I like to use this idea of a chili cook-off. We need to make chili. That's our problem statement. And in fact, that's a poor problem statement, right? Because we're not just going to this competition, we're winning it. We need to make the best chili. We already off the bat are going to need to do some research. What goes into the chili? What do people like in their chili? How spicy should we make the chili? All right. You can set up different criteria for you, right? A lot of this is practice. When you hear about people who are serial startup entrepreneurs, they've learned through practice and effort. So don't think that the first company or device you try is going to be your blockbuster company or your Apple, okay? And practice this as a student. Go through thought exercises because then when you're doing it for your real device or product or service, you're going to be able to do it much more efficiently. So I'm going to give you some constraints. You got $50. You only have 5 days. You cannot make a soup. It must be a chili. And you need to get to the location by 5 p.m. You'll have 1 hour to get there. So you need to be done by 4 p.m. 5 days from now. All right. That's a lot that goes into all those logistics. You have to do some research. Go look up recipes, right? Move forward from there. You need to do some research. How many people usually attend a chili competition? How many people do you need to serve? How much are you going to serve them? So you need to brainstorm all those different components. And you'll see that winning the chili competition, the technical details of the chili are very important, right? But they're not the only factor, and they're not even the major factor. Some ideas, right? Dietary restrictions, food taste preferences, and what recipes are already out there. All right, so that's all I have for you today. I hope some of that was new or forced you to think about topics you've already learned in new ways. I think one of the challenging things can be that there's a lot to do and you can feel like you're lost swimming. So just keep focusing on progress and moving forward. Don't let perfection become the enemy of the good or the enemy of progress. Make sure you know the people, all right, your stakeholders, your customers, your users, and get out there and get it done. Thank you all very much for being here today. I'm happy to take any questions.
Can you don't mind opening your camera and stuff?
Yeah. Oh, geez. I didn't realize my camera was off. Yeah, and I'll go ahead and stop the share, but I can go back to that. So, yeah, are there any questions from anyone? Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so you don't want to chase perfection for your first product, but how do you know it's good enough to be your first product?
You don't. That's the short answer. Everyone be like, oh, it's good enough. Obviously this can change the field you're in, right? You're not going to go into a clinical setting and just throw a device in or on a patient, right? There are regulations there. A lot of times animal studies are done first in these kind of things, but really you have to get a point. And this is why I go back to that minimum viable product. What are the most, and once you have your device thought out, once you've solicited input, and once you really understand the problem, then you can go back to your device and say, what are the big 2 or 3 functions and components of my device that are absolutely necessary if I'm going to solve that problem? Focus on those, focus on testing those, because if you don't have those, if you don't have those, you don't have your product. And they might be all you need. Everything else can change more easily, right? So that's how I would start. Focus on the minimum viable product there. Once you're at that point, focus on understanding the problem, functionality. Yeah. Other questions?
I actually have one question for you. When you're talking about resources for students, faculty, or staff, besides the makerspace, can you tell some to the audience, like what other resources they can use to improve their design?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I'm going to say, right, obviously there's Blackstone Launchpad that's here. That's going to be a lot more on the business end. But yeah, how can you go and figure out the design? Honestly, I have found that UCR is a pretty welcoming environment. Sure, some of us engineers come off as, you know, bit with an ego. But many professors, if you approach them ahead of time or at the first class and you say, hey, look, I'm a ceramic student and I have this idea for a design that's a little bit engineering heavy. Ask them if they have any resources, but also find courses in the catalog that might have the information you need to learn. Maybe it's a coding course in CS, and maybe you don't have time to enroll in the course, right? Your credits are full, you're busy with other things. You're a little bit intimidated by the workload, so you don't want to enroll and trash your GPA. Fine. Show up, ask the professor, is it okay if I just sit in the back during class? If I essentially, it's called an audit the course, sit in on it, you take notes. You typically don't do the homework or the exams. You don't get credit. It doesn't go on your transcript, but you get the knowledge. And that's what's really important, right? Is that you get that knowledge. If you've really fleshed out and you have a solid understanding of the problem, that helps, because then if you go to some of the science folks on campus here and say, hey, here's my idea, they may let you join the lab as a researcher. We have undergraduate researchers in the labs over there that come from all over campus. Student organizations are another big one. Society of Women in Engineering, that's the shirt I'm wearing over here. Go to their events. There are going to be engineering students there who are going to have resources or are looking for projects to work on. That helps them build their portfolio and expand moving forward. And they may not have the entrepreneurial mindset, but they might be really interested in the technology. BMES, the Biomedical Engineering Society, is another fantastic one. You're going to be able to start networking with these individuals. People love helping students. Even on LinkedIn, if you start connecting with people, I wouldn't spill all the beans on the details of your idea. There are people out there who would take it. But if you say, look, I'm a student, I'm looking for some information on X, they may get back to you on that. Believe it or not, if you're looking to go the textbook route, there are some really great textbooks to learn how to code and to learn how different sensors work. Hit up the library, talk to the librarians. I'm looking to understand how CO2 sensors work. They will be able to guide you. They will be able to help you suss out the good sources from the terrible sources, and you can move forward there. But that's really what it comes down to, is just networking and getting in touch with those folks. All right, thanks everyone. If you're listening in again, just my name is Professor Rob McKee. I'm in the bioengineering department. My office is up in MSC. Feel free to swing by or shoot me an email at rmckee@ucr.edu. All right, take care, and I hope you're doing well. Bye.